Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I understand that tonight's questions are more or less going to roam all over the map. There will be no particular theme. Well, that's fine. Let's go. Who will begin?
Mr. Branden, what does the degree of emotional openness between two people have to do with how close a relationship is possible?
Well, I would say that it has everything to do with how close a relationship is possible. Consider what emotional openness means. First of all, consider what emotions are. Emotions represent the value significance which events have for us. Our feelings reflect what things mean to us, events in the world, people, and so forth. To be emotionally open, therefore, means to communicate with another person or to share with another person the value significance of things to oneself. That means to communicate, to be open about a very intimately important aspect of one's personality, because there is nothing more important about us than our values. If we are secretive or closed about what things mean to us, or communicate only on a very superficial level about very superficial things, but are not willing to open up and be straightforward about important value meanings to us, about the things that really reach deep inside us, why then obviously we're not going to have a very intimate relationship with another person. The relationship is going to float on the surface of our life, in effect. It's not going to reflect or involve the deeper aspects of our personality. Now, since in this context I assume that you are talking about a romantic relationship, certainly it's in such a relationship that one wants to relate on the most intimately personal level. When people enter in a romantic relationship, that's normally what they desire. One of the reasons why they're so often frustrated is because they mistakenly imagine that they'll be able to attain that kind of closeness without the emotional openness of which you speak. If a person is not willing to be open about his feelings, which means to be open about what things really mean to him, he cannot possibly achieve a good, close, intimate, meaningful romantic relationship. Yes.
Mr. Branden, what are the most important questions to consider in evaluating the suitability of a romantic partner?
That's a hard question to answer briefly. First of all, when we fall in love with somebody, we don't fall in love after an abstract, theoretical deliberation of their various virtues or qualities and then conclude that they have enough good points for us to be in love with them. You know that's not the way it happens. We meet someone, we feel close to that person, we feel turned on by that person, we experience a sense of affinity, perhaps of recognition, and we may then proceed to identify why. We may then proceed to identify what qualities in the person are causing this response. So I'm going to just talk at random about some of the things that are obviously important. If you talk about suitability, then one of the most important questions that you should want to know is, do I like this person? Not merely am I sexually attracted to her, but do I like her? Do I respect her? Do I admire her? Do I admire her as a person, as a human being? If I wasn't romantically involved with her, suppose that I were in love with someone else and she were in love with someone else, would I like her and respond to her and admire her for what she is as a human being? Because if the answer there is no, you're already in trouble. Now, furthermore, when we fall in love, it's because we experience, as I've already indicated, some strong sense of affinity with the other person, some sense that that person is like us in intimate and important ways. Now, it's very unlikely that you are going to be able to exhaustively define all the elements that go to make up that affinity, because they are very complex and very subtle, and because part of what makes the affinity is not merely the different elements, but the particular way they're combined in that person. But you should try to identify at least the essential qualities to which you feel yourself to be responding. And that in turn leads to the question, are those qualities ones that you objectively admire, or do they perhaps appeal to you because of certain faults or weaknesses or defects or unresolved psychological problems of your own? For example, you might be attracted to a girl who, among other things, projects a kind of weakness and dependency on you, and if you're a man who's not too sure of himself and not too sure of his masculinity, she might make you feel very strong and powerful just because of her weakness. Now, that happens every day, but it's not a good foundation for a romantic relationship, you see. So that would be an element to consider. Another element to which I attach considerable importance is there should be, in a good romantic relationship, at least roughly commensurate levels of self-confidence. You can't measure those things exactly, and I'm not talking about perfect equivalence. But if there is a major observed or felt discrepancy in self-confidence levels, that's a bad sign for the future health and strength of the relationship. Another obvious factor is intelligence. Here again, I'm not talking about literal equivalence. But if you are a very abstract person, and she is a girl who couldn't even spell abstraction, let alone think in terms of abstractions, why then the relationship again is going to be in trouble. Another very important aspect, but a hard one to summarize briefly, is your sense of what is important, what is worth focusing on or dwelling on in life. That's very relevant when you're talking about things in the evening, what your mind goes to by itself, so to speak. What kind of subjects, what kind of aspects of life do you feel are interesting, are worthy of your attention? Do you have a desire to talk about, to think aloud about, etc., and so forth? Again, if you are very widely different in the kinds of things that interest you, and I don't mean now in the professional or occupational sense, but in a subtler and more abstract sense. For example, two people might have very different occupations, but they both feel that their work is the most important thing in their life. Well, then they have something very precious in common right there, you see. That's what I mean by what aspects of life are you most preoccupied with? What qualities do you look for in people? Do you tend to admire the same qualities in people? For example, suppose you found that you had radically different tastes or preferences in friends. That could lead to problems. And again, you don't have to all have exactly the same preferences. There can be certain differences and hopefully many overlappings. If there's nothing but differences, obviously the relationship is in trouble. These are just a few items. Doubtless there are many others, but perhaps you'll find this useful.